Spring has sprung at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. Practice number 1 in the books. Actually, it's ongoing, but after 65 minutes of open viewing period, Bill Landis, Jeremy Birmingham, and me, Austin Ward, have been removed from the rest of that practice. So let's get into it. Snap judgments on the podcast.
To be clear, everyone else in the media has been removed as well.
That's true. It wasn't just us. The open viewing period is over for everyone, and we're ready to talk about it. Bill, what did you learn?
Pulled out the
Wow, he's got all the notes.
I my notes out in case I needed to consult.
Tell me what you wrote about number 4.
I just wrote Devin Sanchez's name in all capital letters, and then I circled it a bunch of times. I think among the freshmen, especially, he is the one that stands out to you. Then there's some good-looking athletes out there, no doubt about it. But he is bigger and longer, I think, than I thought. I've only ever seen him like walking around in sweatpants and a hoodie at an Ohio State game. Never in a football uniform doing football things, and he is wildly impressive. They were just going through some team stuff, and he's in the second group, I guess, and I guess maybe we can say that now and feel pretty confident that he's going to at least be there. But it's hard to look at him, and we all thought he was going to push seriously for playing time. But then once you see him out on the field, it's like, okay, this guy looks how he's supposed to look as an Ohio State quarterback, and it's his first practice with the team.
Yep. I mean, told you. There are some of them that are
told you so.
There are some that are just easy to predict, and he's definitely one of them. I said it to you before we started practice, and I know you hate when I spill thoughts to you beforehand. And
no, I actually love it. It's what I live for.
It's last year we were here on the first day of spring ball, and we were like, oh my gosh, Caleb Downs plays for Ohio State. And then today, my first thought was, oh my gosh, Jack Sawyer doesn't play for Ohio State anymore. And it's not really about who's there. It's about trying to adjust to who's not. When you lose a lot of the guys that we've been around every day for the last 5 years, it certainly is a different vibe. Nobody could catch a punt in the first 5 minutes. It seemed like there was some issues. It felt like spring practice number 1 for a bunch of guys that just got back from spring break. Because there was definitely a little...
Weird, that's exactly what it was.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like it, what we saw, but who cares? It's really about just taking stock of what people, where they're lining up, how they look, who's really, been obviously fully immersed in the weight and strength and conditioning program. Right now, I think it's easier to see the incoming freshmen their body changes because it's so stark. Mm-hmm. But you look at Devin Sanchez next to Aaron Scott, and you're like, oh my gosh, Devin Sanchez is huge. And Aaron Scott looks the same as he did 4 months ago, but Aaron Scott was also 20 pounds lighter last January. So
he took that another 20 pounds?
Yeah.
Right. So you
have to keep doing it every
So you're trying to find the right way to compare and contrast these kids next to each other. But it's an impressive looking group. I thought the thing that stood out to me is that Julian Sayin seems very calm out there. Very different than the personality of Will Howard and Devin Brown, who are fiery,
exuberant.
He's a quieter quarterback.
Yeah, these are 3 guys that are all trying to figure out, okay, how do I do this? How do I do this? But Tavian Sinclair looks like so much bigger than Lincoln Kienholz and Julian Sayin that it's kind of off-putting.
Yeah, well, I think in terms of returning guys that you mentioned in there and those thoughts, Berm, some of them still look like they're developing physically. Like the number 4 on offense somehow got, his arms got even bigger. Jeremiah Smith made the most.
You didn't have to say his name. We knew.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know. I said number 4. Because Bill wrote in his notebook last year that he was a big dude, and I think
I did. I wrote.
I like that.
I also wrote Quincy Porter, big dude.
Yeah, I love Bill's notes. I just try and steal from him to go into snap judgments. I thought the same thing about Julian Sayin and Lincoln Kienholz both. I thought maybe we were going to get that thing where we see who goes first in the line, and because that's the part that generally you can read into and carries it forward. And Julian Sayin went first, and then they started with the first team period, and Lincoln Kienholz was with the offense out there. So that was a great way to get into the rolling spirit of the month, so we don't have to get into that. But I thought Lincoln, was pretty sharp with the accuracy, more than he has been in previous springs. I thought that was good stuff from him, but I don't know if Julian Sayin put a foot wrong with some of the throws that he was making. And there was the thing that I'll be talking about and overreacting to probably for the duration of the next 4 weeks is watching Julian Sayin with some of the movement throws, and then either Jeremiah Smith or Brandon Ennis taking some of those drag and mesh routes. It was good luck to you if you're trying to defend that, because it was they were just getting it in stride, turning it upfield. And I know that there was no defense out there, but that stuff was just really I think, impressive to watch from Sayin, and I thought that Keenholz delivered what he needed to do with the football. So that's like, we can get the quarterback stuff done early because nothing is going to be decided after an hour, and nothing's probably going to be decided after April 12th. So that's just checking that box on the quarterbacks.
It was, what's the right word? Weird to only see 3 quarterbacks. There weren't even any walk-ons out there. I'm not entirely sure what the situation is.
Yeah, like,
it was just the 3. It was Julian Sayin, Lincoln Keenholz, and Tavian St. Clair.
I can tell
black jerseys and not another person playing the quarterback position.
I can tell you right now that there's another black jersey that is walking through the hallway of the Woody right now. So eventually there will be another one.
Okay, all right. Well, at least there'll be 4 out there.
What am I missing?
The 4th one was walking down the hallway, just right down there, Berm. So you got to have your head on a swivel.
Was it Dan Marino?
It was Mason Max.
Oh, it was Mason Max. He's on the roster.
I thought he was a running back.
He just wasn't out there practicing. He's on the roster still as a quarterback.
And he's still wearing a black jersey.
And he's still wearing a black jersey. And to the point of him rolling quarterbacks.
Back to quarterback for him.
When they did routes on air, all 3 quarterbacks threw at the same time. So there wasn't even like a way to discern a pecking order there too. No, I thought like for guys throwing on air, like there wasn't anything that was like, oh, that doesn't look good. I think there's a efficiency with the way that Julian Sayin.
See there you go, Berm.
Yeah, there he is. Nice. Efficiency with the way that Julian Sayin just like gets the ball out of his hands that I think is
it's like a dart,
noticeable compared to the other 2. Like it's the RPMs that like the speed on it is still just like everything before the ball comes out of his hands too just happens quickly, which it's not surprising. I think we learned that about him. I think like via Chip Kelly and some of the coaches last year, but I don't know that I like paid a bunch of attention to it last year because it was more focused on kind of like Will Howard and what he was doing, but kind of like only watched Julian today when the quarterbacks were just tossing the ball around, and I thought that stood out, and I think you understand why people think he has such a high ceiling as a passer because there's just not a lot to iron out there when it comes to mechanics.
I think in terms of guys lining up here, there, or wherever, we're going to have to talk more about the offensive line, just the fact that Ian Moore and Austin Sareveld were out there at tackle. I think we can assume that the transfer portal guys are going to get that opportunity with the ones eventually, but they didn't to start today. Read too much into that. I think the only thing to really take out of it, and tell me if I'm wrong, is just like with the glut on the interior, the fact that Austin Sareveld is starting camp at tackle seems pretty noteworthy.
Yeah, he's going to have to play a lot of tackle, I'd imagine. I'll ask Ryan Day about that when we talk to him later on Monday. But we've talked about before that they only have like 3 scholarship tackles who aren't, I guess like 4 who aren't freshmen, but Deontay Armstrong that didn't play at all last year. You have Ian Moore, and then you have the transfers. So like someone's got to play there. Austin Sareveld's like the most experienced tackle they have, if you want to look at it from a certain way in terms of playing at Ohio State. So I'm not surprised to see him there. I'll be curious that maybe we come out here later this week or even later on in spring if we see him do any guard stuff or if he's just going to play tackle throughout spring. Maybe it could be good for him to just play tackle during spring. We know he can play guard.
If they're going to do any split squad stuff this spring, he almost has to play tackle.
Yeah.
Unless you're just willing to get a quarterback killed in spring practice, which I don't think you are. So
right.
It is interesting that Ian Moore was at right tackle,
yep.
And we had Austin Sareveld at left, which would be inverse of what I would think based on.
But that's where Austin Sareveld was in training camp last year. So
it's a big moment, I think, and a big opportunity for Luke Montgomery and Tiger Shabola to lock in at guard, and then let Austin Sareveld's flexibility and his ability to move around serve him well and serve the team well. But I don't think that we're anywhere near complete in the interior of the line either. So until you see Aniano and Daniels, what we presume are the starters by the end of spring at tackle, it's hard to get a real sense of what that means.
It could very well be. Like, we're going to watch practice on Wednesday, and I will not be surprised one bit if it's flip-flop.
Yeah, Will Howard did not take all the first gun with the quarterback last year. It was Devin. I remember standing here on the first day of camp. Oh, Devin Brown's the guy out there first. What does it mean? So
yeah, I'm past the point of like trying to discern a depth chart really on the first day,
especially with transfers.
but I think it's noteworthy where guys line up,
yeah,
and less like who they're behind and who they're in front of, which is like. Because Ryan Day, I guess around signing day, he said Javon McFadden was going to be a tackle, and he was playing guard today, which I thought was interesting.
I think the only other spot where you would even be tempted to do that, if this person was there, and it also wouldn't come as a surprise, Lorenzo Styles Jr. is a veteran, and they need someone to play nickel, and that's where he was. I think that was the first unit on defense was like, you look out there and like, well, that's not going to really change much. That's who it is.
Right.
That's what it's going to be. That's what it's going to look like. And I thought that was like, again, that can change. We talked about Devin Sanchez. We don't know what that means with, Jermaine Matthews and Davison Igbinosun or whoever else throughout the spring. But you had Malik Hartford out there alongside Caleb Downs, and you had Lorenzo Styles in the nickel.
Which I think is what we would anticipate heading into this because of just the pure experience he has and the veteran nature. And he's also a leader guy. Like, you need those. So I would say he has, like, the right of first refusal. Like, this is your opportunity. Go win it. And if you leave it open for someone else, then so be it. But last year, Lorenzo played almost exclusively in, like, the dime packages and was not in the slot. So for that position, which has become vital for Ohio State's defensive success, that is an interesting guy to put there. But again, I don't know who else would be there today.
The second guy, when they did at the very end, they did like team stuff against trash cans. 11 on offense against trash cans, 11 on defense against trash cans. The second team
Finished in the tie.
It did finish in the tie. Second team nickel was Bryce West.
So, which I like, yeah. Bryce makes sense there.
Yeah. Corners were it was Devin Sanchez and Aaron Scott outside, Bryce West in the slot, and the safeties were Jalen McClain and Leroy Roker.
Yep. Anything else in that notebook that you want to get out? We have a lot more to talk about that we're going to do throughout the day and on the daily tomorrow.
I think we're good. The only coach who was, again, we didn't see any scrimmaging. The only coach who was out there wearing a headset was Brian Hartline.
They were calling in plays for routes on air.
Yep.
Getting involved in that. And Nate Ebner is out there. He has signed a deal to be a quality control coach for Ohio State.
How about that?
We've been hearing his name a lot.
Cash me outside. How about that?
So,
Matt Patricia coming up with some more Patriot
ties
here. What does that say? Like, Nate Ebner is one of the guys that I think Ryan Day probably asked pretty extensively, what was your experience with Matt Patricia before he got hired? Mm-hmm. And now Nate Ebner's like, I want to coach with this guy. That says something, right?
There does seem to be a lot of validation from the people who actually have been around Matt Patricia. Now, maybe that wouldn't be the case in Detroit. I don't know.
I was talking to the father of a recruit out here as we were watching this, and he said Matt Patricia has been a revelation and incredibly surprising as to how much they've heard from him as a recruiting coordinator, but also how personable and relatable he's been, which is something that I think, again, for those of us who never met the guy and knew nothing about him other than the reputation he came here from the NFL with, I think that is okay. Take the walls down a little bit. Maybe some of the confusion about the hire seems to be dissipating.
Yeah, I think when you zoom out, it makes a little sense, but we'll see. They've only practiced one time. In fact, they're not even done yet as we stand here right now.
Before we wrap, one other guy that just stood out to you physically or what he looked like, how he was leading, how he was running the show. Who's one guy for you?
I thought that the first person that I actually took note of was CJ Donaldson, and it wasn't for the reason that we talked about. There's like, you're going to be wowed by the power. And I remember watching some of the film from West Virginia, and I remember having this conversation with you guys maybe a month ago. It's like, well, this kind of does seem like a thunder and lightning situation and more of a fullback body type to pair with James Peoples. But that was not what he looked like after 2.5 months in the weight room with Mickey Marotti. I thought I'll have to check and see, and we'll ask him. I think he's going to be available for the first time on Wednesday, what changes he made. But in person, and maybe the camera adds X amount of pounds. I don't know. But he did not look the same.
That's what's happening
physically.
That's all that's happening.
As I laid eyes on CJ Donaldson for the first time on the practice field, and I bet that he would say that was one of the things that they did, because he looked much slimmer than the way I think he played at West Virginia. We'll get into that with him and Carlos Lachlan once that day arrives in spring camp, but he did not look like what I expected him to look like. And that's not a slight by any stretch of the imagination, because he's definitely strong, he's definitely powerfully built, but he is not probably at the weight that he played at West Virginia.
He's listed as 237, and I would say he looked even slimmer than that. And I think at West Virginia, he was playing over 240 at times. So he definitely stood out to me. Other one I would say, Will Smith Jr. on the defensive line. Larry Johnson said last week that he's gotten a little bigger because they want him to play one tech and nose, and I thought that was noticeable. He's only listed at 288, and I guess he's maybe on the shorter side for a defensive tackle, but I thought he looked beefier in a good way, I guess, to play more of that one tech position.
For me, it's also defensive line of Cedric Houston. He looked significantly larger but also you could see, we saw it with Edric last year, a kid that is, people gravitate toward him. He is extremely well-liked and big personality, big energy, and that group needs someone to lead in a major way, and I could see him being that guy already, which is pretty important. Your best player has to be your leader, and he's the best player, and I think the best example of a guy that's stepping up and saying, hey, this is not my room, I'm going to take it.
Yeah, we're going to talk way more about some thoughts and analysis and takeaways from spring practice number 1 as we roll along today, both at the live show at Roosters, and then we'll be back with some takeaways on Tuesday on the podcast daily. Bless you, Berm.
Trying to hold it, couldn't do it.
Couldn't
I
do it.
wanted to be like, hurry.
That's sorry. I think people needed to see that on camera, just to know that you're a real human.
Yeah.
He feels real emotions and has real sneezes. Anyway, thanks for joining us for our first initial thoughts, some snap judgments on spring practice number 1. Great to be back out there Monday morning in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. For Bill Landis and Jeremy Birmingham, I'm Austin Ward. We'll have more coming your way on the podcast. See you there.